Good morning. I am Mary Ann Williams, service leader for today. Unity of Bloomington is part of a worldwide spiritual movement dedicated to helping people to discover and express their divinity through prayer, study, and practice in the world. We welcome you, whether online or in this room, all are welcome here. It is Labor Day weekend. A national holiday originating around 1882. We take this occasion to honor the many people who work, especially those whose work so often goes unacknowledged, unnoticed, and undervalued. There's a phrase I wanted to share with you that I think kind of opens into this topic. It is a vast topic with a history going back to the beginning of humankind. Charles Fillmore wrote in The Revealing Word that the true object of all work is to express the powers of one's being, and to benefit humankind. So let's begin this morning with our welcoming affirmation, which says, all together, we are a heart-centered community seeking spiritual awakening and transformation by deepening our connections with God, self, and others. And singing together.
Who thinks the thought that changes the things that shape my life. I am the thinker who thinks the thoughts. I have the power to change my life. If you ask me who am I am wisdom, I am light, I am more than meets the eye. I cannot be defined. Changes the things that shape my life. I am the thinker who thinks the thought. I have the power to change my life. I can choose to be the light that brightens someone's darkest night. I'm so much more than meets the eye. I cannot be defined. That changes the things that shape my life. I am the thinker who thinks the thought. I have the power to change my life. I am the thinker who thinks the thoughts that changes the things that shape my life. I am the thinker who thinks the thought. I have the power to change my life. I have the power to change my life. I have the power to change my life.
Let's all take a moment to step aside and greet each other. When you hear the music, come back to your seats. Transition affirmation, which is printed in the bulletin. And it goes, and we will say together, Unity of Bloomington is generating an abundant future in expansive alignment with Spirit.
We lean deeply into true principles, live our faith, and trust the process. Our greatest desire is to be abundant and attract those who value spiritual growth,
including our next right minister. Be seated.
If you read what we have outside on our signboard, it says basically that progress is all about stepping out, okay? You can't steal second if your foot's still on first base, I think is what it says. Well, we're going to do something a little different this morning. We have a round. How many of you have ever sung Row Your Boat? Okay, so you know what a round is, right? You start at different times. So this is called Peace in Our Lifetime. Richard's going to talk about chaos and what we can do about it. Okay? So peace in our lifetime starts one life at a time, us. So that's what this song is all about. There are the words up there. We're going to go through the entire thing with everybody without being around, just to learn it the first time through, twice. And then I'm going to come over there, and we're just going to use the aisle, I think. This side of you will sing with the music team and start the round, and I'm going to come over there and sing with you to be in the middle of the round. The smarter ones have to start later.
Wait a minute.
Here we go from the beginning.
One life, one love, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time. One truth, one world, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time. One life, one love, one life at a time. One truth, one world, one life at a time.
Good. One more time all the way through.
One life, one love, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time. One truth, one world, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time. One life, one love, one life at a time. One truth, one world, one life at a time. One life, one love, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time. One truth, one world, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time.
One life, one love, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time. One truth, one world, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time.
One life, one love, one peace in our lifetime.
One life at a time.
One truth, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time.
One life, one love, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time. One truth, one world, one peace in our lifetime. One life at a time.
One life, one love, one peace in our love.
One life at a time.
One truth, one peace in our
world. One life at a time. One life, one love, one truth in our lifetime. One life at a time. One truth, one world, one life, peace in our lifetime. One life at a time.
One life,
One life,
one peace in
one
our
love,
lifetime.
one life Crisis starts next Sunday. I expect you all to be there. Thank you.
Our speaker this morning grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and completed his entire education in that wonderful school system, including a Master of Science in Chemical Engineering at the Speed School at the University of Louisville, a Master of Divinity from the Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and then a certificate in organizational development from the NTL Institute in Arlington, Virginia. His consulting career specialized in high-performing work systems. His musical career, his interest, is in fiddle and violin and fiddle. Though his love of classical music led him to perform with a number of symphony orchestras and chamber ensembles, he notes with amusement that it was his pursuit of bluegrass that led to his engagements at the Lincoln Center in New York City, and then he also performed at Bill Monroe's Bean Blossom Bluegrass Festivals and at the Opryland in Nashville, Tennessee. His instrumental album, The Wooded Shore, was released in 1985. He hosted the WFHB radio show Rural Roots and has served on the Unity of Bloomington Board of Trustees as a member and then as president. He is the father to 2 children and 1 grandchild, married to Mary Ann Williams since 1979. He enjoys ideation, contemplation, conversation. Richard Torstrick, we welcome you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. When I was originally invited to speak, it was back on Father's Day. I started to think about my father for that. And when David LeBeau was available, we, of course, prioritized that. So I got delayed to Labor Day, and I was thinking about my father in that context already. Because my father's work life were a major part of his definition, both for himself and the way I saw him and still see him in my mind. This is Labor Day. We celebrate Labor Day. We celebrate those who labor. And our culture, if it valued laborers more, we wouldn't need a holiday, we'd have a living wage. I'd invite you at this moment to close your eyes and remember someone who has been special in your life, for whom part of your identity is wrapped up with the labor and the work that they devoted their life to. And I'd invite you to keep that person in mind as we continue. Okay, title, Leadership, the Polycrisis, and Unity Principles. What's leadership have to do with labor? Well, we're going to get into that. What in the world is a polycrisis? We'll be dealing with that as well. Unity principles we're all familiar with, although I'm going to show them in the light as how it applies to this whole situation we find ourselves in today. This is the first time that I've spoken here that I will be talking about me and my life and my work, so this has been a labor of love to present this. Anyway, back to work. I started a job in chemical engineering, quit a perfectly good job, went back to seminary, came out uncertain as to what my role in life was still at that point, and took up a job back in the chemical industry, and I got involved with the quality movement because I was always really fascinated by the idea of technology and work and also very appreciative and seeing the work through the lens of the people who did it. And there's a juxtaposition there that we often forget. Just so you know, this is not a security blanket, but since David LeBeau has always brought books, I brought books. Ginger also brought books. These two books have a special place in my life. This is Marvin Weisbord's Productive Workplaces. Good. Seb is really on the job here. Thank you, Seb. This book is what I found when I was doing the quality work, and it really intrigued me as it was a history of consulting in organizations to improve their effectiveness through the 20th century, starting all the way with Frederick Winslow Taylor, and leading to reorganizing work along the lines of open socio-technical principles to produce high-performing work systems. Systems in which my father would not have come home at night bitter and complaining about the work system that didn't value his efforts. So part of the hard work was finding an inspiration, and I was able to be involved in trying to bring about high-performing workplaces to produce places where my father might have been proud. And the second one came out 5 years later. This is Margaret Wheatley's Leadership in the New Science. And in this one, she really outlined how science has moved. All of our organization models that we hold in our head are based on principles that go all the way back to Isaac Newton. Remember Isaac Newton? He's the one who saw the apple, And he developed this model of what got called the clockwork universe, that, everything's like a machine, and it's all ticking and everything's in place. And it's kind of constant, and all we have to do is monitor the machine. And we've built all our organization models, and this is true for the whole Western world. Our internal model for organizations and the way we design them is in our head. It's part of the culture. It's part of the air we breathe. We're so used to the top-down organization with multiple levels of control. What did the science say at that time? It was reductionism. Reductionism has it that essentially you can break a system down into its smallest little parts, and you can examine the little parts in isolation. And when you do, you can understand the whole system if you've got all the parts, right? That makes a certain kind of sense. Okay. So what happens is when we build systems that way, it has particular results. And we'll talk about them a little bit. Because what happens to the people in those systems? When I've been broken into the smallest part and my function is now the narrowest possible function, I'm not a person anymore. I'm a part of a machine. And I was designed that way because organizations don't want to be vulnerable to somebody leaving with a lot of knowledge that they're really depending on, right? I want to be able to take 5 minutes to train a new person and fill in that slot, and the machine goes on, operating as if nothing happened. That has an inevitable cost on people. So the new model is open systems. Let's take a look at that. In the new model, it's characterized by self-directed work teams with people with whole jobs. Workers have full knowledge and can operate the system because they're the ones managing the outcomes. Eric Trist, who developed this, he's a member of the Tavistock Institute, and I'll talk a little more about that in a second. Someone asked him to characterize in one sentence what it is that characterizes the difference between high-performing workplace and our traditional way of managing. He said, you've got to get the supervisors out of the system. And by the way, this kind of organization was actually discovered. It was not invented. In other words, this wasn't somebody's grand idea. This was a discovery. The Tavistock Institute, during World War II, got involved they're interested in people and leadership. And leadership, you notice we're going to start juxtaposing people and leadership and labor and how those things are connected. Because it's our ideas of leadership that count here. They got involved in officer selection for the British Army during World War II because leaders were dropping. And they needed to replace leaders, lieutenants, in the field. So the Tavistock Institute got involved in a selection program to predict which kind of person was most likely to be effective in that role. It was in 1949 when he and, let's get the brief history up, Seb, if you would. It was 1949 when he and a fellow named Ken Bamforth visited an open wall coal mine in England. They went down into the mine, and when he came up, he said, "I'm a changed man." What they saw down there was a work system where the workers themselves had organized everything. They had essentially told their supervisors to go up and be upstairs. Don't bother us, because it was convoluted technology. It was difficult to work with, and the unions got together and they figured out a work system where they could actually have multiple shifts doing different kinds of activities. One shift would do the production, the next shift would do the cleanup, the next shift would do all the maintenance of the equipment because it was a high maintenance operation. And they got this rolling, and the mine was more effective than it had been before that. No one could figure out how to get it to work that way. So they call this model open socio-technical systems because Trist had to go back together and figure out, well, if they could do it, what would it take for other people to be able to do this? And he developed a model of jointly optimizing, first, the business requirements. In business, we talk about the money spent, the cost of supplies, the profitability, all the customer and supplier relationships. The technology is another piece. And that's what process we use to put things together. And in the classical organization, those are the two things that we look at. And we develop this process, and there it is, and I need a person to stand there and watch this gauge while this is loading. In other words, the people are an afterthought in the traditional model. But for Trist, the people, their social relationships, who talks to whom, how does information flow? How do people know what they're doing? That model also is another piece that needs to be jointly optimized with all the others. So we cannot leave out this definition of labor. There have been many, many implementations of this worldwide. Those of us doing this work saw that this is our way to save the world. I mean, literally, that's, we were all motivated by a system that not only performs better, but has better human outcomes as well. These plants, they've been very effectively tracked. Results exceed the old model performance by 35 to 40% in every conceivable measure. That's worker satisfaction. Yeah, you might expect that, but it's also profitability, costs. Every conceivable measure, these systems exceed the standard, the old mental model of the top-down organization. And of course, worker satisfaction is a big feature. So isn't this what every manager wants? Would you think so? Why are we having this conversation? Here's the result. The managers of the plants and the facilities who were successfully implementing this and, thus were managers of a performance that exceeded the other plants in their system were all dead-ended in their careers. Why is that? They could no longer speak the same language as the other managers in the corporation because they understood what it meant and what kinds of things were important in running an organization like this. And they saw that immediately, if you'd have tried to implement the old system here, you would have been back to failure. Marvin Weisbord gave a tour to a vice president of a pharmaceutical company, and this was after the Bloch Petrella Weisbord had done a project. They had implemented a high-performing work system in a local pharmaceutical plant. And again, measures. So the vice president was pretty quiet when they were touring, and Weisbord said to him at the end of the tour, "Well, you've seen this system now, tell me what you think." He said, "I cannot deny the numbers. I've watched this plant for many years now. This was our worst performing plant in our portfolio. Today, it's the best. But this place is out of control." We have a mental model that says control is all vertical. In a high-performing workplace, it's much more like the model that Margaret Wheatley talks about, chaos theory. You go through chaos, and in nature, there are self-organizing systems, like the coal mine. That was a self-organizing system. It's not a top-down approach, it's a horizontal. So he walked through this and literally was blind to the horizontal controls that were much superior to the vertical controls. He could not see the vertical controls, and therefore, this place is out of control. The new leadership model is countercultural. Those of us doing it could see this, trying to work with a system in order to do it. The plant had to be on its last legs before it was considered to be a candidate for any kind of change, and it was always a last resort because nobody could kind of understand this. High-performing work systems, if you've never seen one, is difficult to understand. So let's do a simple example. It would be hard for me to show you how you'd get to a high-performing system, but let's take one very small, simple system that is more or less a high-performing system, and let's do what the classical organization design says you should do with a system. Let's take a bowling alley. Okay? We're going to start with a bowler. So the first thing we're going to do is ask, let's really make each part of the system just responsible for its own action. So what's the bowler's job? Some say knock the pins over. I've seen bowling a lot of times. I've never seen a bowler knocking pins over. Have you? Rolling the ball. That's the bowler's complete job. And have you ever noticed when you see a bowling alley how the bowler rolls the ball and stands there wasting time while he's watching the ball go down and do whatever its job is? That's a waste of time. So what we're going to do is help the bowler focus on his real job, which is rolling the ball. So we're going to, right about the foul line, because he's not supposed to go past that, we're going to drop a curtain down with a hole in it just wide enough at the bottom so the ball can get underneath. All right? And we're also going to hide the score sheet because that's need to know. The bowler doesn't need to know the score. He just needs to get the ball rolling in the right direction. Watching that score sheet is management information, and we don't want the bowler going out and talking to people about, our information, right? So does a problem occur to anyone? What's the problem? Can't see. What? Does the bowler roll the ball in the same place every time? No. Oh, we can hire him a supervisor and tell him where to roll the ball. And not only that, but the supervisor can have another function. He can coach him in the right form, the right way to move, and the right way to put the spin on the ball. And the supervisor can have a managerial function so that if he sees the bowler as, wasting time, or he can write him up. Stage 2 of progressive discipline. What would happen to our motivated bowler? Would he want to bowl anymore? How many times have you heard one of our politicians say, these people just don't want to work? Okay. Chris Argyris in 1957, and he's one of the people who kind of hung around and really was interested in the dynamics of people and movement and so on. And by the way, this is something behavioral science had actually already demonstrated in 1939. I have the films. But anyway, I will read this to you. It's a Chris Argyris quote from a paper he wrote in 1957. Ideally, healthy development in our culture, that means human development, involves growth from being passive as an infant to being active as an adult, from being dependent to being relatively independent, from being in a subordinate position to achieving equal or higher position than friends achieve, from expressing few and shallow abilities to expressing many and deep abilities. Okay, that's human development. We know that process. We've all had it happen to us, presumably. If formal organization is defined by the use of such principles as task specialization, unity of direction, chain of command, and span of control, then employees work in a situation in which they tend to be dependent, subordinate, and passive to a leader. This type of situation may create frustration, conflict, and failure for the employees. And here's a key statement. He may react by regressing, decreasing his efficiency, and creating informal systems against management. How many of us have seen that kind of behavior in a workplace? Is it evidence that that's what the people's capabilities are? Well, we have therapists in the room. You know what to call this. This is what we would call adaptive behavior. Human beings tend to adapt to a system that they're in, and they adapt to reduce conflict for themselves. And, they also have feelings that get involved in this, which we know there's a spectrum from passive compliance to aggression, whether it's against some of their fellows or the management or whatever it is. That's the natural reaction of people in the work management system that's in all of us. It's in our brain. It's in our DNA because we've inherited it. It's cultural. That's the right way to manage, we think. And, that system still comes out of me when I see kids misbehaving. I mean, I grew up in a German family, children are to be seen and not heard. What does the unity principle number 3 say? We create our reality through the activity of our thinking. Can you see the activity of our thinking is this model of the right way to organize and how we've created this world? The wreckage from the command and control model, which is the model we've been talking about, is summarized in a song that went viral about a week and a half ago. Seb, if we could have the next slide. How many of you have heard this song or know anything about it? Anybody never heard of it? This is a song written by a young man, recorded it with just himself and his guitar, and put it on YouTube 2 weeks ago or so, thereabouts. I looked about 3 days ago. It was up to 50 million views. This song has been called the anthem of labor. And I would encourage you to go have a look at that. It's tempting to identify the politics of this person to see where he's coming from, but he, in interviews, has very carefully dissociated himself with either of the major political movements that have happened in this country, saying, oh, those politicians that want to use my song and think that I'm talking about something that they agree with, he says, it's them I'm singing about. Well, I want to show you a new model of leadership. This model is more suited to the high-performing work system. Some say that you really can't measure leadership or identify it. And I would say if you got a good statement of it, it is measurable. And I'm going to offer a statement that's not mine. It was developed by Robert Freed Bales, who taught a course at Harvard University in group dynamics for 45 years, and put groups, leaderless groups, in situations, let the chaos emerge, and realize that nature goes through chaos. Chaos is just the natural, that's sort of the seething building grounds for self-organization to come out of. Self-organization. Anyway, here's the model. Leadership is the ability to unify a diverse group around a common task under varied, often difficult conditions over an extended period of time. How's that sound? Let's do it one more time. Leadership is the ability to unify a diverse group of people around a common task under varied, often difficult conditions over an extended period of time. So, in this model, is there any organizational position attached to this definition? I would assert that every single person in every organization can do this. And in fact, shared leadership is the real model to a high-performing work system. What's it like to be in one of these places? I was touring a electronics manufacturer in Pennsylvania. They had developed high-performing work systems. They made big printed circuit boards, and those were assembled into instrument control systems for industrial operations. So it was electronics, but it wasn't personal electronics. It was bigger things. The equipment was on wheels because the work team, when they would meet, say, I think we ought to move this over here. It would help us move this thing from that thing and improve our process. They'd discuss it, try it out. Whatever worked. When I toured, it was shift change, and there was a person sweeping the floor. This is a team member, though. In teams, people have redundant skills. So this person's trained in every part of this operation. So it's not a floor sweeper, which the old model would kind of keep a person into that box. This is a team member. I asked this person, how do you know when you're doing a good job? In a top-down system, how would you know? Boss will tell you. This person thought a second and said, we test our product at the end of the shift every day. So how does this person know what they're doing? If the business goal is being met. I mean, can you think of that? Can you picture that in your mind? People that we wouldn't have assumed had that capability. In fact, top managers don't believe their people have that capability. They've never seen them in a high-performing work system. Automotive vice president brought in to be the plant manager in a traditionally operated assembly line coming from another plant that had a full team-based production system. We're doing a series of workshops, encountering all the line people, just introducing the idea, the kind of communication, what's involved if I'm going to be a team and I have to be a team member. And now my job is going to relate to, I'm going to be involved in making even decisions about how the work gets done. New idea. And, I'll not be doing the same, repetitive motion for the rest of my life. So I asked this VP, when you came in here, did you notice any difference from the place you left? He was vice president there too, and by the way, each management position had both quote, professional managerial employee along with a union member. They both occupied the job together. But he would say, yeah, he said, biggest thing I can tell you that'll help you understand the difference. When I would go in to work there, if one day I walked in to that plant where I came from and said, I think there ought to be a hole in the wall over there. In that plant, that would have generated some discussion. We'd have got the team together, we'd have looked at the pluses and the minuses, and we would have made a team decision on whether that made sense. He said, I can't say that here. What do you mean? If I said that here, I'd walk in the next day, there'd be a hole, and there'd be 3 managers standing there taking credit for getting it done. Which one of these systems is rational management, I ask you? Okay, so why did this group of consultants find less and less work to do? Well, along about the late 80s, there started to be more upheaval in the stock market, various things, there are more and more upheavals around the world. And it just seems that we've gone downhill ever since. And there is this continuing model of things going wrong in our society that has now been given a name. It's called the Polycrisis. Let's take a look at this. The Polycrisis, I'll read it to you. It's a confluence of environmental, social, technological, financial, economic, natural, and other forces interacting with ever-increasing unpredictability, rapidity, and power. And we're caught in it. These unpredictable interactions are causing future shocks of ever greater frequency and amplitude. So this is kind of the handwriting on the wall for us. As consultants, we noticed in turbulent times, what do managers revert to? It's what they know. It's this culture in our head. We found people less and less willing to invest in the kind of time and energy, and it does take time and energy. You can't just pull the supervisors out of the system. You have to redesign the system so that workers have what they need to really develop control of it. And these projects take, a year or two in a plant. So that's a big investment. Managers more and more risk averse. By 2001, we didn't know of any projects that were going on. That's when we decided to move to Bloomington. So the systems analysis says we're better off if we look at the structure and not the events. The Polycrisis, all these events that are happening. Well, what are the structures underneath these events? It'll help us to understand them better, and we can get off the hope-despair roller coaster. If we're on the hope-despair roller coaster, every newspaper headline, oh yes, oh my, oh no. You ever been on that? I have. I read the paper every day, so. But if I can take a step back, go back into my unity consciousness, and look at this from a systems point of view, I can keep a level head and a clear mind about what's going on. So here are some of the factors that are in this polycrisis. First one, this is a view of history. Well, why is that important for the polycrisis and understanding it? Systems underneath events, okay. John Glubb published a book in 1978, The Fate of Empires and Search for Survival. And he studied 10 systems. He was going to study more. And at the end of the 10, he said, there's no point in studying anymore. These are all identical. The phases are easily discernible, and the results are, and we're talking about from the beginnings of human civilization until right up until our age. And he studied these empires. First comes the age of pioneers. Remember our pioneers? The next is the age of conquest. Remember, we had to take land from people that didn't say they owned it because they didn't understand the concept of owning land. We did, so we said, okay, we'll take ownership. Then commerce, then trade routes began, and beaver skins are shipped back to the east, and you know the story. The whole idea of commerce gets built up. Finally, the Industrial Revolution comes, and I'm applying this to us, of course. Then the fourth age is affluence. Remember, just before the stock market crashed in 1929, it was the age of influence. People could burn money in their shower. Then came the age of intellect. I remember back, and a lot of you are too young to remember this, but back in the 50s, the common conception was science could solve any problem and we could work our way through any of this through just pure intellect. The sixth age is called decadence. Guess what describes decadence? One, population has a big interest in sports. Two, population has a big interest in music. And while that's going on, the population's got all these things entertaining them. The third and most telling factor, and this is true in every single example of empire, is the looting of the national treasury by the uber wealthy. Folks, this is inevitable. This is where we are, this is what's going on. And if we look at the system, I mean, how many of the newspaper headlines are wrapped up in what we just saw? Okay, so that's just one little piece of the polycrisis. There are many more, but I just want to highlight one, or actually two. That was one. The next one is the UN Refugee Agency says from the year 2012 to 2022, the number of refugees forced into displacement around the world increased from 40 to 108 million. So more refugees are trafficking in countries. That particular factor is what's being credited to giving rise to the movement around the world in governments of becoming authoritarian, closing the borders, fear of immigrants, the whole situation we find ourselves in. Well, what's going to happen in the future? The Institute for Economics and Peace project that by 2050, based on current climate models, 1.2 billion people will be displaced by climate change. 1.2 billion people. There are no systems that can support this. And another factor in the polycrisis, this is based on current environmental models. Every environmentalist will tell you climate change is happening an order of magnitude faster than any of the models predict. So it's kind of like You are here, and there's a rock here, and there's a hard place there, and we're in between. So no one knows what's happening in the future. Future is uncertain. We don't know timing of events and everything, but we can project that it's quite likely that there will be an increase in suffering. So how do we respond to this as unity? Oh, I wanted to show you one more quote. This is Chalmers Johnson. Including in the empire. Margaret Wheatley, leadership in the New Science, she's still active today. And she is, like us, one of the people who gave up on the idea of trying to reform corporate culture. Culture. The culture change is an oxymoron. You ever think of that? Culture change is an oxymoron. So what do we do based on spiritual teachings? Margaret Wheatley says the best thing we can do is to maintain clear minds. It's so easy to get off into the hope, despair roller coaster, or to get into the fear of what's happening. She discovered an order of nuns who were more and more responsible for conducting their own worship services, who were confronted by a high-ranking member of the hierarchy who told them, "You are not going to be able to do this. We're going to break you up." And then said, "Why aren't you afraid of me?" And the Mother Superior said, "We have faith, therefore we're unafraid." And I'd suggest that's our role in this. The command and control model no longer serves us. It's partially responsible for what's happening in the world. And it's certainly responsible for the low perception we have of labor. This is Labor Day weekend. So how do we honor those who labor in light of the fact that the cultural stereotype places them at the low part of the totem pole? Well, we know that we're all in this together and there are no second-class citizens. Divine nature is part of every single one of us. Events of the day are merely signs of the unchanging systems that are underlying them. That's another thing that we can know and understand. Unity principle number 4 says prayer is creative thinking that heightens the connection with God-mind, helps to anchor us so that we see things clearly, so we can prioritize the practice of daily meditation to maintain clear minds. Finally, I would offer an affirmation. Maintaining our spiritual lives with clear minds. I am a beacon of divine affirmation to everyone around me. That's what we can offer in a time of suffering. I invite you to say that with me. I am a beacon of divine affirmation to everyone around me. There is no work situation that can define me as less than a full member of the human community, with my divine nature at the core of my being. I also pledge to not control others. They're full members of the human community, as I am, with divinity at their core, just as mine. I remember all those who work. I affirm their efforts, present, past, and future, and I honor them. Let's reread the affirmation. I am a beacon of divine affirmation to everyone around me. This is my work. Let us prepare for meditation.
We are holy, holy, holy. We are holy, holy, holy. We are holy, holy, holy. We are whole. We are holy, holy, holy. We are holy, holy, holy. We are holy, holy, holy. We are whole. Spirit divine, come to me, feeling love, healing me. Open my heart, allow me to see beauty and love lives in me. We are holy, holy, holy. We are holy, holy, holy. We are holy, holy, holy. We are whole.
I invite you to close your eyes. Just get comfortable. Let the idea of labor float in your mind. How many meanings does it have for you? Images come. Factories, perhaps. Cleaning tables in a restaurant. Construction work. Field workers. Now let your mind wander back to an earlier time. Plantation workers. Involuntary. All those people, all of the people who built the world we live in and are building it even now. Our fellow divine beings, abundant gratitude. Now bring your thoughts in a little closer. That person you pictured at the beginning. This is the day we honor all of them. We affirm them. We send divine affirmation to them into the silence.
We are grateful for all that we have, that for most of us we have grown up in relative comfort. We put our effort forth now to sustain this spiritual center as the greeters come forward. Let us say together our abundance affirmation, which is, I am an abundant being in an abundant universe. I am not dependent on people or situations for my good. God is the source of my supply. I always have something to give, and I consistently give it. I expect the best, I give my best, and I now attract the best in every experience.
It's to be, if it's to be, if it's to be, it's up to me. If I seek the truth, let me speak the truth. If I'm lost in doubt, let me believe. I know I can be the change I want to see. So if it's to be, if it's to be, if it's to be, it's up to me. If I'm tired and stressed, let me stop and rest. If I'm feeling hurt, let me forgive. I know I can be the change I want to see. So if it's to be, if it's to be, if it's to be, it's up to me. If I dream of peace, let me be the peace. When I start from love, I am love. I know I can be the change I want to see. So if it's to be, if it's to be, if it's to be, it's up to me. You know it's up to me. You know it's up to me. If it's to be, you know it's up to me.
And as the ushers come forward, let us say together our offering blessing. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, and I am grateful. We have several announcements this morning. Coming up on Wednesday, September 6th, the Chapel Renovation Committee will meet right here at 5:30. Sunday, September 10, the Unity Choir rehearsals will begin again right after the service. Thursday, September 14 is Unity World Day of Prayer, and we will have the chapel open from 4:30 to 9 for prayer activity, quiet reflection, and at 8 o'clock there is a beautiful concert that will be live streamed. Wednesday, September 20 is the board meeting at 5:30 here at Unity. Thursday, September 21st, a drumming circle at 7 p.m. Sunday, September 24th is our wonderful fall picnic potluck after the service. Speakers coming up include Mr. Joe LaMontia, community artist, on September 10th, followed by Michael May, former president of this congregation, on September 17th. On September 24th, Reverend Ron Fritz, credentialed Unity minister, will speak to us via Zoom. And October 1st, Chuck Thompson will speak on the Great Mystery. So let us together say our prayer of protection, which is, the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever God is, and all is well. And joining together in Let There Be Peace.